the podcast or anything to that effect?
No, nothing from me.
Okay.
Yep, feel free to fire away.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, great to have you here. We may as well just roll on right into it. And we are here
Sounds
with the
good.
lovely Taryn Williams. We're here to talk about your 20 years in business, the Tarynverse, if you will, your numerous businesses. We're going to talk about the influencer economy. But the really big question that the people want to know, Taryn, is how long does it take you to do your hair in the morning?
That is the most pressing question. You know what? It is the laziest haircut of all time. It's actually one of the reasons that I maintain it this way. It looks like I've made an effort, but I've actually made zero effort. So I'm very
Okay.
fortunate that I actually wake up and it just sits like this. It's having a great hairdresser and a great haircut just does all the work for me. So
Well,
I mean, we
I'm
could be
supposed.
twins though. We're pretty close there.
Possibly. Well, see, I'm Taryn's on the podcast today, so I've got to get my quiff on, right? I can't just rock up like
Got
I
to get
rolled
that
out of bed.
volume happening.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know. Like when this is the thing about getting haircuts. Like the first 2 or 3 days after I walk out of the barbershop looks phenomenal. After that, it's like it's on a downhill trajectory. But what do you
That
do? What
is
do
the
you
one
do?
pain point. You got to get the sides done.
It is every single week, I think, at least
Yeah,
once every 7 days.
yeah.
But as I said, the Terranverse, you've got numerous businesses, Wink Models. You founded the Right Fit and the influencer agency, which you sold last year, and you've now founded another business called Gifted, amongst other things. But taking a step back, going 20 years back in time to 2006, when you were 21 years old, you'd spent a number of years working as a model, and you decided to establish your first business, Wink Models, which is still going 20 years, almost 20 years later, 2024, so 18 years later. But back in 2006, like startups weren't really popular. They weren't really the done thing, and definitely not for a 21-year-old woman, especially. So, like, where did that desire to start a business at such a young age back in 2006 come from? Like, did you have entrepreneurs in your family, or like, where did that come from, Taryn?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. And you're so right. Back then, it was really like small business owners, like entrepreneurs were not a thing. That was not a word bandied around at all. There
Mm,
wasn't any sort of startup networks or support networks to go to get information. Um, so, no, I didn't have entrepreneurs in my family. Um, but what I probably realized looking back on it now is that a lot of my friends in my sort of late teens, early 20s were self-employed. So they were either amazing freelance creative directors or photographers, makeup artists, or small business owners. They owned advertising agencies or restaurants and bars. So I didn't have a lot of friends around me who had a very traditional career, a 9 to 5 job, and with a very linear sort of career progress ahead of them. So
mhm.
I probably didn't realize what a big risk it was or how different it was, the choice to go and start my own business. And I was also, I guess, in a situation where, having been self-employed myself, having modeled and produced for photographers and managed events and produced events, I wasn't also leaving, having to make that big decision to right, I'm going to quit my job and go out on my own. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think reflecting on it, I probably just didn't realize that it was so different to most people's traditional career paths.
Mm. So a little bit of perhaps surrounding yourself with people and modeling their behaviors, as well as perhaps some youthful naivety as well, going into the world of business.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. And
Absolutely.
being so young at the time, like, did you get some pushback from the industry, trying to establish yourself, or was it more or less, up to the races from day one?
I had a really great support network around me of people that could see what I was trying to achieve and the reasons behind it. I wanted to pay models fairly. I wanted to pay them time. That was, a
Hmm.
real sort of key point of difference in Wink. And then I wanted to be a really strong extension of our clients' team. There was this, I wanted us to be collaborative and on the same side, as opposed to being sort of combative relationship that a lot of clients had with talent agencies and model agencies. And so I had a lot of people who were really supportive and wanted to see me succeed and were happy to, throw jobs our way or recommend talent to us and refer other businesses to us. But it was definitely a long period where, I hid behind emails, didn't want to go to face meetings with clients.
Mm.
It's just sort of the good old days where, you wouldn't have Zoom meetings, you would just have phone calls. So And because I was really conscious of my age, and especially when we were dealing with really large campaigns where you're asking a client to part with $100,000, $200,000, and understandably they're probably going, well, gosh, can this 21-year-old really execute that for me? So
Mm.
I was definitely mindful of it, and I tried to manage it the best I could. And I think the combination of having people who wanted to see me succeed and were willing to support me, and then I think my dogged determination to make it succeed, and this wild work ethic, high risk appetite, and sort of pushing through, I think is sort of what really helped us get there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned like network a couple of times, having that strong support network around you that you no doubt established through, I think you were working as a model for about almost a decade prior to founding Wink Models. Like for entrepreneurs perhaps starting out today, maybe they're in their 30s or even their 40s, right? And they might think in some cases, well, maybe I'm too old. I should have started this in my 20s. But by that point, they might have spent 20 years establishing their network and might actually be in a better position than someone who's, say, 25 years old.
Yeah, absolutely. And in most cases, by then you've got really deep domain expertise in something as well. So it makes it easier, I think, to identify problems or challenges in industry that you can solve. So I think there's never a right time or a wrong time to start a business or go out on your own. I think entrepreneurs generally have a higher risk appetite and a sort of desire to solve for problems, and the ability to identify, I guess, new business models or new ways of working that could be disruptive to sort of a traditional business model. And I definitely think there's pros and cons of age versus youth. I think you're absolutely right. There's a blissful naivety of youth. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know how hard it's going to be. You've probably got more time and energy to dedicate to businesses. You probably don't have the overheads or private school fees or a mortgage that you have to pay.
Yeah.
So there's certainly pros that come with that, but there's definitely a lot of cons as well. You don't have the life experience. You probably don't have the established networks. You don't have the key learnings of either building other businesses or working within organizations and understanding things that you're going to come up with.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no shortage of entrepreneurs who say things like, if I knew what I know now when I started, I probably wouldn't have gone on
Never
that
would have
journey.
started. Yeah.
Yeah,
So true.
absolutely. So if, I mean, to that point, if you could go back and talk to your 21-year-old self, like what would be one big tip or word of advice you'd give her based on what you know now?
There's a couple of things that I think I really sucked at in the early days. Look, delegation was I wanted to touch everything. I wanted to be across everything. And I think, I was a real blocker to our success in the early years because I was so determined to make sure I was, across everything. I wanted to do everything. I wanted to be done my way, as opposed to realizing that I could delegate and hire people to do particular functions of the business. That would allow us to scale, and it would free me up to do the parts of the business that I was really good at and that I really enjoyed, which was like a far better use of my time. So I think that was definitely a big one. And I think also probably just enjoying the journey a little bit more. I think I spent a lot of time being really focused on what's next, instead of celebrating some of those incremental victories along the way. It was, kind of felt like there was never a right time to stop and look up and go, oh, great, wow, we've just opened our first interstate office, or hit a particular milestone, or just raised capital for the right fit, or whatever it was. That I don't think I spent a lot of time really enjoying the process and celebrating those wins.
Yeah,
far too focused.
absolutely. And when you build something like I built a 7-figure business previously, and looking back on my journey building that business, it's not necessarily the money in the bank account that I think about or remember. It's the times I shared with that team, the highs, the lows, and sometimes look back on that time really fondly. I'm like, oh man, I wish I was back there again in my, I think I was about 30 at the time. And that's really, when you're on your deathbed, you're looking back on life, they're the things you remember.
So true. So true.
So, I mean, fast forward to 2016, you'd spent, about a decade building Wink models, but you then saw an opportunity as, the influencer economy took off, and capitalized on that opportunity by building what was essentially a marketplace, the right fit, connecting influencers with brands. At a high level, that's essentially what it did. Now, years later, so you built this business for 7 years. Long story short, you sold it last year because you were basically generating thousands of bookings a month across APAC, so killing it. But to that point of delegation, like during this journey, you did hand over the keys essentially with the right fit and the influencer agency and other business you built to a management team, to you had someone else step in as a CEO. Talk me through that transition. Like, was that easy for you to relinquish that sort of control with these businesses that you'd spent so many years and putting your blood, sweat, and tears into?
Yeah, look, there was a couple of inflection points along the way, I think,
Mm-hmm.
with the right fit and then with the emphasis agency. I think when a business gets to a certain size, there's definitely, certain things that you simply can't be across, right? You can't touch every element of business. But also that they were technology companies. And so there was things that I just simply was not a domain expert in. And I had to surround myself with really good people. So bringing in a really great CTO, for example, really great product managers. So I think that really helped, was being surrounded by really fantastic people that, really, I think, helped me in feeling safe and understanding they would execute and do a phenomenal job. And just that we were running at such speed, like once you raise venture capital, as you probably know, like you've just got such a speed to need to execute. You've got growth targets that you need to hit. There's so much to do on a day-to-day basis. Only way to be able to achieve those goals is having fantastic people that can own different pillars of the business. And you're all shooting towards the same North Star metric. You all know where you need to go. But you need to have a product manager who can really own that experience, have a great CTO who can own engineering, running the engineering team, building fantastic high quality products. So there's only so many things that you can touch in a business day to day. Definitely selling the business and handing over the reins was a really interesting journey, because of course you build this thing and it's your blood, sweat, and tears and your heart and soul, and often as an entrepreneur, I think as well, there's so much an extension of you. I think your business has really become. I was very much like the face of my business. I've been for Wink and Gifted, and so I think that idea of, okay, this is no longer mine, and it's going to a new home and going to new owners and going to exist without me. And I spent a lot of time really in the process of going through the sale and working with my mentor and going through, okay, what does this mean for me? How do I feel about this? And I guess sort of mentally and emotionally preparing myself for that transition, and being really clear about what I wanted that journey to look like, what I wanted the transition to look like, and what I wanted sort of future state to be. So I think that certainly made it a lot easier, was, I think having a clear action plan and goal plan of where I wanted to go next.
Absolutely. And I think there's a few things I want to double click on there. But first of all, being a non-technical founder with the right fit, what advice would you have for non-technical founders who want to build a tech platform when it comes to, say, picking a CTO, but also how to communicate, requirements to a technical person? Because that's where a lot of people become unstuck and they just don't know how to navigate that, and they ultimately don't know what they don't know. So,
and it's such a challenging space, because obviously most businesses now have a heavy element of technology involved in almost all startups. And it's really hard. I come against this with a lot of the companies that I mentor, because if they're non-technical founders, I don't even have a silver bullet solution of saying, well, great, go and work with this venture studio, or go and hire this agency to build your products, because even that is not a surefire path to success. You still need to. For me, I've always built my engineering teams in-house, and there's pros and cons of doing that. And obviously being a non-technical founder, I can't audit someone's code. I can't know if they are, producing fantastic quality products for me. There has to be an element of trust. And so it's always come down to a few things for me. Cultural fit, like, does this person understand what we're trying to build? Do they understand the business case? And do they understand the vision and the mission and the values? Can we work really closely together? Because as a non-technical founder, you need to work so closely with your CTO or engineering team. Like, it's so important. Two, can they explain things to me in a way that I understand? And obviously over time, my technical expertise is so much more now than when I was building my first. I actually built an end-to-end onboarding, calendar management, payroll integration software for Wink. That was my first sort of like dabble into technology. So when I look back from there until now, and I had no idea about building an MVP or any sort of programming languages, pros and cons, wireframing, front end developers versus back end. I had to learn all that as a real baptism by fire. So obviously over time you learn more and more. But still now, like I have to rely very much on our CTO to say, hey, this is the right infrastructure, or yes, this is the best environment for us to be. These are the engineers that I want to hire on my team, and this is why. So I think having someone that can explain things to you really clearly in a way that makes sense. If a CTO can't do that for you, or if there's a tone of like, oh, you'll never understand, or don't worry about it, it's not important for you. Yes, it is very important for you. So you need that. You need someone who can patiently explain things to you in a way that does make sense to you. And I think I hate this like fake it till you make it mentality. Like ask for help. I throughout my journey have put up my hand so many times and said like, hey, I need to recruit my first CTO. I don't know how to do that. I can't audit their code. I can check cultural fit. I can do reference checks. I can do all of the other pieces, but I simply can't check their code. And so putting a hand up and asking for help and saying, look, is there someone on your board or in your advisory network or a friend who does have that skill set that can go, sure, I can do a code test. I can go through this process and come back to you with evaluation. So I think if you can combine those few things together, finding the right sort of technical fit doesn't have to be this sort of black box, really scary thing that you don't want to tackle.
For sure. And I mean, on asking for help, you did say that while you were selling the right fit, you had a mentor that helped you through that process. Have you always had like a mentor or mentors since you founded Wink Models up to today? Is that something that's kind of guided your journey forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And they've sort of been really invaluable, I think, in my journey. And they've all come about organically. I don't think there's like a silver bullet solution to this either, where you can say, I'm going to pay this service and, get a mentor and it's going to solve all my problems. Mine have all been people that I've met throughout my career who were further along the journey than me, and who we've sort of built a natural rapport. And I've been very conscious of developing a deep relationship with them that is, I hope, mutually beneficial, and that I'm very respectful of their time and their resources and their energy. And I would make a very clear point of following up, touching base, asking for help or support, coming back and saying, I've done these, 8 of the 10 things that you've asked me to do. This is the outcome. This is where I'm stuck. Could I get some more feedback here on these particular areas? And so I think closing that loop and showing that you're really serious about this, and showing that you really, you're taking on board what they're saying, you're going and actioning it, you're coming back, and that you're really fostering those relationships. I almost ran for like a few years, like basically a personal CRM, and I would have a spreadsheet of the people in my life that I needed to meet with, weekly, fortnightly, quarterly, yearly, and I'd go through and I'd be like, right, this is the mentor that I want to see once a month, and I would make sure I'd have a process and I would follow up and I'd touch base, and I think that's sort of really what helped those relationships really be beneficial to me and help me on my journey, because I gave them enough visibility and transparency over a regular period of time to what was going on, and I really took seriously their feedback and actioned it. And I think people really respect that. I genuinely believe that most people are good people and they want to see others succeed and they want to help, and they're happy to help if you make it easy for them to do so. So, I think mentors are totally invaluable. Really played a key role in my career.
Yeah, and you mentioned there that you took their feedback on board and actioned it, which I think when a mentor sees that, they're more inclined to want to continue to spend their time and energy helping you, as opposed to some mentor who might say, hey, I think you should potentially, put together a list of 100 people in your target audience, reach out to them, have coffee, just pick their brains, find out more about their industry problems, whatever the case is. And then a month later, you see that mentor again. They're like, hey, did you do that? You're like, oh, no, I didn't have time, or I didn't prioritize it. And if they keep hearing that, they're like, well, what's the point of this conversation or this relationship anyway?
Absolutely. and also the number of people, I get people that reach out and, say, oh, can we catch up? Can I pick your brains? Like, I'd love some mentoring.
Mm,
And they're just sort of like, oh, I don't really know what I want to do with my life. Or I'm a little bit like, I can't help you with that. Like,
yeah.
but I can help you if you come to me with a specific set of problems. Like, I want to build a marketplace. This is where I've got to. These are the sticking points that I have. Here's the 3 options that I've mapped out that I think would work. Can I have half an hour of your time to run through these things? Like, absolutely. Like, show
Mm,
me that you've got to that point. I was like, I'm not Google. Like, a lot of the time, you can just Google stuff. Like,
yeah.
go and Google the key metrics in a marketplace. Come to me and say, look, I can see I'm hitting these ones, but I'm really stuck on this one. How would I solve for X?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
show that you've put in that legwork.
Yeah, and Mr. Beast says a similar thing. He gets a lot of YouTubers approaching him saying, "Oh, hey, can you help me with my channel?" And he'll tell them, "Hey, until you have at least 100 episodes published or 100 videos, you don't even know what you're doing yet. So once you have 100 videos, I see that you're actually committed to the craft. You're figuring things out. I'm happy to try and help you out." And yeah, it's so hard when people approach you like, "Hey man, can I pick your brain?" But they have absolutely no idea what they're working on. And it's like, if you're trying to figure out what to work on, there's books, there's blogs, there's podcasts, like go off, do that stuff. And then once you have a better idea and you have explicit questions or problems that you're trying to navigate, then perhaps we can have a conversation. Um,
Yeah.
and on books and podcasts and whatnot, obviously there's a billion things out there on MVPs and minimum viable products, and the lean startup philosophy, which it's like over a decade old now. I can't believe it's been that
It's
long.
wild, isn't it? I feel like I remember that coming out so clearly and being like, wow, got to,
Yeah,
life changing.
yeah, absolutely. I think it was like 2011 that it came out. So
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, in your sort of early experiences building tech products, I imagine you didn't take the MVP approach from day one. Like that's something you had to like learn through failure, more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Trial and error. So with the platform that I built for Wink, I thought I did all the right things. I was like, I want this app that could check our model availability, schedule them into shifts,
Mm,
keep their personal details with shoe size and height and whatever, and then manage invoicing our clients and checking for overtime and updating billing details, those things. I was like, simple, great. Like, put together a Word document of what I wanted this thing to do. I got quotes from 3 agencies, and I was like, cool, great. They've given me this quote. They seem to build similar software. Good, I'll go with them.
yeah.
And I was just like, wow, I could add this feature that does this. Oh my God, I'm going to add that. Oh, it can make comp cards.
Yeah.
Wow, okay, I can keep their driver's license details. Oh, I do. Oh, it can have a Xero integration. I just was like the dream client for them. I was like, add that, add that, add that. So it took 3 times as long as it should, cost 3 times more. And I didn't have any proof that this thing was going to, work and streamline the business and solve the pain points that I wanted it to solve. But I had no idea about building an MVP. So definitely learned the hard way. And so with the right fit, I was much clearer about what I wanted to do. I was like, okay, I'm just going to build a really quick and dirty WordPress site. It's not even going to have any functionality of a marketplace. Clients are going to come, they're going to think they're posting a job, post what is actually just a form that comes to us.
Yep.
We go, can we then go and find someone to fill this job? Yes, fill the job, present that back to, ta-da, amazing, here's your match in the marketplace. Do things that don't scale. Yep, we've got a proof of concept. Now, actually, let's go build it. So,
Yeah.
trying to be much more data driven, really focusing on like what do we really need to get this thing to market, and having to get over that. People always say you've got to be embarrassed by your MVP, otherwise you've launched too late. You're really having to put your ego aside and go, oh, I know this is pretty clunky and I know it's a bit ugly, but if people use it and they battle through and they see value in the tool, then yeah, it's worth it.
Absolutely. And the beauty of taking that approach where it's, say, just a WordPress site with a manual backend is you can test a lot of different sort of ideas and hypotheses relatively quickly that way versus, say, paying an agency 6 figures to go off and build a product over the next 12 months. And that's basically it. And you've spent all your time and money on this one thing that may, or
Yeah,
more likely than not, may not work. So,
yeah, absolutely.
um, so having sold both the influencer agency and the right fit, you've founded Gifted, which is a gifting marketplace for influencers, connecting brands with influencers, well, it's not a marketplace, rather. It's a Shopify plugin. But you founded that in 2021. Was there any sort of desire to perhaps just sail off into the sunset after selling your businesses?
Yes, I was actually supposed to take a 12-month sabbatical. So I'd started Hash Gifted in the background while I still had TRF, and it was supposed to be just, a small business that, it's really simple, platform. It's a
Mhm.
SaaS business. So yes, we have a Shopify plugin. You don't have to have Shopify to use it, but, it does
Okay.
streamline all your orders if you're on Shopify. And I
Mhm.
thought, great. I had a co-founder in that business. I was like, fantastic. I'll sit on the board and, I won't be involved in the day to day. And I'm going to take a 12-month sabbatical, and I'll come back when the business is sort of at more of an inflection point that I can really add value. And unfortunately, my co-founder exited the business. Just wasn't right for him at the time. Wasn't the sort of right project, right time. And the business was doing phenomenally well. So I was like, oh God, I can't put a bullet in its head and just, go, oh, well, we'll park that one and come back to it in 12 months' time. We'll park it and come back to it in 18 months' time. I was like, oh, business is doing really well. And it sort of reached that inflection point where it really does need like a formal CEO. And it's ready to scale, and it's got, the gut feel of product market fit happening. And so I had to park my sabbatical, come back, get back in, all hands on deck into the business. And I've just in the last week of recruiting for our CEO now, and then I'm going to take a sabbatical. So I'll still sit on the board. We've got an amazing board of advisors, and let the CEO run it.
Yeah,
So
I love it. I love it. So is this like an extended sabbatical? Are we talking a few years? How long are we taking off, Taryn?
oh, look, I'm my own worst enemy. So I'm going to go away for 2 months. I'm
Yeah.
great when I'm not in the same time zone as Australia. And when I'm out, I would say out of sight, out of mind. When I'm here, it's very hard to say no to opportunities. And
Mhm.
I've got a bottom drawer of ideas, I'm sure, like you, that I'm like, oh, I'd love to execute this. And I meet, other phenomenal founders, or I get opportunities to join boards and, do speaking engagements and things like that. So I find it very hard to say no. I really love businesses. I love, building out ideas. I love, working with other founders.
Yeah.
And so it's very hard. So I don't know. I don't want to commit to a specific time. I know I've obviously been, working at a crazy pace for a very, very long time. I'm going to take a proper break in a very long time. So
Yeah.
I know I need it, and I know that it's probably almost scarier to take time off and have to sit with, like, who are you without your businesses, and who are you when you're not working 14-hour days. So I'm sure there's a little bit of resistance to having that time off as well.
Yeah, and I mean, just on that, I think you wrote a blog post about a year ago. I'm a recovering struggle porn
Yeah,
addict.
yeah,
And, you talked about he built all these businesses and you had financial success and all the rest of it, but sitting, I think you're on the Nile at the
Egypt,
time,
yeah,
and there was nothing to do, and you essentially didn't know how to sit with yourself and just be.
yeah,
And you reflected on that and you said, I need to invest more time in relationships and things of that sort.
yeah,
So curious to check in, like it's about a year later now. Like, how is that
yeah.
journey going for you?
Well, not well, in the sense that I came to threw myself back into this, because there was definitely a point at, when my co-founder left the business. I could have just said, you know what, like, oh good, I'm going to park this thing, and, let it sit, or just let it sit there and bumble along. Or I could have not come back into the business and just hired a CEO straight away on the spot. So there was definitely an element of me going, I just want to get back in and get my hands dirty, and that itched to get back in and get my hands onto something.
Yeah.
So look, I think I failed a little bit there. I've definitely been a lot more conscious about how I'm investing my time, and I think the drivers behind it.
Mm.
So I think I've done a better job at investing in relationships and really nurturing the deep, close friendships, and probably less so the ones that are, I don't want to say transactional, but I think you get to a certain age and you know your people, and the ones that are sort of the weird and wonderful like you, and like these the relationships that I really want to invest in. And I've been trying to spend a lot more time investing in the relationship with myself as well, like doing a lot of personal work, carving out time for things like acupuncture. And I've always been good at prioritizing exercise, but probably not enough time for things like counseling, psychology, naturopath, dietitian, acupuncture, massage, all of those things that are, super important to having a bit more of a holistic life. So look, it's very much still a work in progress. I
Yeah.
absolutely don't have it nailed. And ask me again I technically finish up on the 25th of June. So ask me again 3 months after that and see how I'm traveling.
Okay, I'll make a note to check in. Um,
Hold me accountable.
yes. I mean, just on the sort of concept of struggle porn, I mean, we have nowadays guys like, I suppose, Alex Hormozy really
Yeah.
pushing that, Gary V. And I've got a few younger male friends who are like in their late 20s, either they're, influencers or entrepreneurs, startup founders. And sometimes I feel like that stuff appeals to them for quote unquote the wrong reasons. Like they might say something like, went out, got rejected by a girl, but it was motivating. It made me want to work harder. And so then they're like just drowning
Yeah.
themselves in work because that's fuel for their fire. And in some respects, it's like good because it kind of can motivate you. And you see these hustle porn videos and
Yeah.
podcasts, and it's like, yeah, email 100 people a day, just work harder than the next person and you'll succeed. Like no relenting and so on and so forth. But I feel like sometimes it appeals to like, yeah, people's sort of base instincts that come from a place where their relationship with themselves isn't very healthy. And so they
Yeah.
deep down they feel like they're not enough. And so they just need to work harder and harder. And if they make more money, then they will be enough and they'll get the adulation of the crowd. But unless you've fostered that relationship with yourself, it will never be enough and you'll never be happy.
I couldn't agree more. And I think just taking that time to sit with yourself and go, okay, like what is the underlying driver of all of this? Is it that I need the recognition and success? And when is enough enough? Is it,
Mm,
do I have some scarcity mindset, like that I'm never going to have enough financially? And where does that come from? Is there something in my upbringing that made me feel that way? Or, did I have a parent that only, gave me time and attention when I was winning awards? So is that why I feel like I have to go on? And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to alter your behavior, but knowing the drivers for that behavior and why
mm,
it is that you're doing those things, as opposed to, I think, mindlessly just sort of following that message of work harder, do more. That's going to make you happy, or that's going to give you success, and success is going to make you happy. Because those things are not the same thing. It can be.
yeah.
I'm sure we both know many on paper very successful people who are deeply unhappy and have really troubled relationships, and who I'm sure would trade any amount of sort of wealth for deeper, meaningful relationships and connections, or inner satisfaction. So I think it's a very troubling I think culture, that sort of hustle
Yeah.
culture.
Absolutely. And I guess the obvious question here, without psychoanalyzing you too much, Taryn, is how have your drivers changed over the years? Like what were they when you were, say, in your early 20s compared to what they are today?
Yeah, I mean, I look back now and I think I was definitely operating from a place of fear. I was so fearful of like letting people down, not getting it right, not doing enough. And so I would
Mhm.
just overextend myself in every area. I wanted to be enough to so many people.
Yeah.
And that definitely wasn't coming from a healthy place. It was, really trying to grapple with something there. And I think now I'm able to be much more self-reflective, and I think take a step back from situations as well and go, okay, this thing has just happened. Instead of just reacting in the moment to that thing, what does it actually mean? How do I feel about it? Am I reacting truly to what has happened, or like my history of what I'm bringing to that whole interaction? Whether that's past circumstances, whether that's childhood stuff, whether that's being mindful enough to go. There's never there's never a true version of an event. It's just what both people saw happen or felt happen.
Mm,
And I think that's so true across work and personal lives. So I think now I'm able to be a little bit more conscious of my drivers, and I think I'm much more self-reflective, and I can say, look, I think think I handled that well, or I did well there, or I've got some weak points here and opportunities for growth here, or here's the areas where I want to invest time and energy in self development. Here's the areas that are not a priority for me right now, and that's okay. So it's definitely a work in progress, but one that I think it's been one of the most enjoyable journeys of my life doing this personal work, and I'd highly recommend it to anyone.
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I mean, just on the driver question, it's so tempting now for young people, in their 20s and even in their teens to play, the social comparison game because they're effectively living on social media. And I think it was Naval Ravikant, the founder of AngelList, who said something along the lines of competition is blinding. So if you see all these people amassing followers and clout online without giving it a thought, you're like, well, that's what I need to be doing. And I need to be chasing that because that's appealing to some sort of base instinct of yours, and competition is blinding. But you're not really reflecting on the driver. And is that actually what you want to do? Like, do you want to spend all your time doing that just so you can feel good about yourself relative to this other person? Or is there something else that's way more suited to you that's going to appeal to your strengths, your predispositions, your passions, and it's going to light you up every day? It's and you look at the stats, like young people, I think 60 or 70% of high school kids today want to be, YouTubers or influencers when they grow
influences.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really wild, and I can't imagine. I don't have children. I can't imagine, having to raise children in these times, and what they're exposed to, and the really visceral impact that social media can have on their brains, and the dopamine that you get from the likes and so yeah, I do think it's really concerning, and I think that the validation that they see from, we're fed such a highly curated view of the world on social media, and what's important and what's successful, look in a particular way, amassing a certain number of followers, being wildly successful, having the freedom to, travel whenever you want, going on these, the European holidays, like, how are these people affording it? Why is that not me? And I think it's really unhealthy because there's so many people who are, so many people say to me, I would leave and go and start my own company. Like, you have an amazing job that you love in a company that, gives you fantastic conditions. And, your idea is within this, sector. Have you gone to them and talked to them? You can be an amazing entrepreneur. You could build this as a product within an organization, maybe get equity within it, still get to work and not take all of the risks on your own. So I think there's so many different pathways to success. And I think we don't spend enough time looking holistically about life and what makes people happy, and instead just chasing down these particular drivers, whether it's looking a particular way or amassing a certain amount of wealth, which I think would be incredibly challenging for young people to get into, I guess, broader validation.
Yeah, I mean, there is that famous study, I think it was Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, when they said they based it on American audiences, and this was about 15 years old, so adjust it for inflation. But they basically said, up to about 75,000 US dollars per year, there is a strong correlation between, subjective well-being and income. But after that point, it kind of there was a disconnect. It dovetailed, so the connection wasn't as strong. And at that point, it is doing work you enjoy, relationships, experiences. Of course, the more money you have, the more you can spend on experiences. Maybe you attract high quality people into your life, and the depth and richness of those relationships gets better. But on average, above a certain point, more money won't bring you or won't fill that void that you're looking to fill deep down.
Yeah. I think it was Stanford had the happiness course that you could do online. Laurie, get her surname, Laurie Santos, I think it is. I actually did it during COVID, and it was fantastic. It was just some of the data in there, about the inflection points, and like, is being married going to make you happier? Well, actually, I think it's for the first 2 years, married people are, happier than the average, but then that also drops off. So I think all of these things that we chase, money, status, wealth, possessions, there's all of the research on lottery winners, like that. So I do think it's really fascinating that we don't stop and actually look one, at the scientific data that these things are not going to make us happier. And two, you really have to have conversations with ourselves of like, what makes me happy? Is it, spending time with friends and family? Is it, those deep and meaningful connections? And, if it is, having a fantastic career, great. What is it about that you really love? Is it solving problems? Is it, helping customers? Is it, building something big for the future? Understanding sort of drivers.
Yeah. And I think that just comes back to understanding, again, the drivers. And I think not just putting social media aside, but whether it's like, I'm not married, and it's something whereby I felt that pressure to kind of take that step because that's what society tells you to do. That's what my mom tells me to do. But it's like, well, maybe at some point in the future, I will feel like that is something I want to pursue and I'm ready for, and so on and so forth. But right now, like, I don't think it's going to make me happy right now. That there are other things that I want to focus on, but it takes a certain level of, I suppose I'll call it courage to do that, because you do kind of become somewhat, I suppose, villainized, or there is a stigma associated with that. So it can be difficult for people to do the thing they actually really want to do. And whether it's marriage or whether it's pursuing a business idea or whatever the case is, if there are sort of these, if there is a social construct or a stigmatization around a certain thing. But kind of on that point of authenticity, so working in this space of influencers, I think you did comment on this. This was probably about a year or two ago. This was around a direct message exchange between Abby Chatfield and Samuel Levi around vaccination. So Abby posted a very kind of ambiguous post which suggested or was interpreted as her being, anti-vaccination. And then Samuel basically DM'd her saying, hey, you better clarify what you meant. Otherwise, I'm going to tear you to shreds on my podcast tomorrow. And it's like, to me, when I read that, I was really taken aback that someone could be so like, just basically a big, just vitriol, just a big bully, essentially. But also, the response, like from her initially, she kind of walked it back a bit. She eventually posted the DMs publicly and made everything public. But there is this sort of pressure on, influencers to say, quote unquote, the right thing, do the right thing, even if it might be at odds with what they think. And so their authentic self gets compromised. And we see this with influencers and content creators who kind of fall victim to audience capture as well. Like they might say things that appeal to people on the far right of the political aisle or the far left. And they kind of have to keep doing that because suddenly they've got this audience who believes a certain thing. And if you want to keep that audience happy, you need to keep putting out certain types of content. But ultimately, like, that comes at a cost to your integrity. It's like that. I think it's a biblical verse, like, for what does it profit a man if he gains the world while selling his soul? Something like that. So like, what's your take on, basically that world of inauthenticity in social media?
It's really hard, I think, especially in this time of sort of diversity and inclusion, and how much words matter and how loaded and charged so many things are in the world right now. We've got Ukraine, the Middle East conflict. There's so many challenging things that people feel so strongly about, and so I find so many creators are trying to walk this safe middle line and not offend anyone, as you say, very much at the cost of being able to feel authentic, and being able to share, whether it's their true experiences about parenting or, about weight loss or exercise, or, and worrying that they're going to share something that may feel very true for them and have been their personal experience. And this sort of concerning state that I think we find the world in at the moment, where people have so much anger and vitriol that they are willing to say things like that. You shouldn't be promoting that you're exercising and working out. You should just love the way you are. You shouldn't want to change your body. And this, it's almost like that there isn't a safe thing to say online. I think that's really sad, because it's what actually resonates really well on social media is authenticity, and people being able to share their thoughts and their views and experience. And
Mm.
I would hope we would be able to have a healthy dialogue about these things, and people to say, hey, look, mate, I disagree with your view on this particular political issue, but, I, I'm willing to hear you out. You're speaking from a place of your truth, and, you're bringing facts to the table and sharing your experiences. And instead of this sort of anger and attacking that you see happen so
Yeah.
often on social media, which you just wouldn't see in real life. People wouldn't speak to each other this way in real life and say, "Oh,
Mm.
you look awful in that," or
Yeah.
that's an awful thing to say. Or you're an idiot. You don't know anything, and it's just so awful. So I don't know how we change that, but we really, really need to, because I think you're absolutely right. It does cause people to get stuck in these content silos as well, where they're perpetrating a particular narrative, and they're stuck in, this is how I've maybe shared something on a particular view of the world. The content that I'm now receiving reinforces that view of the world, and I'm going to keep going deeper and deeper into this narrative,
Yeah.
and it doesn't give them the opportunity to either see outside of that or step outside of that, which I think is really dangerous.
Yeah, yeah, we're stuck in our internet filter bubbles, and yeah,
Yeah,
like you say, we only receive content that's reinforcing our worldview, and therefore it forces us to other people who have different
yeah.
views, and that creates this polarization, which can be quite negative for society at large. But
I know,
it is
especially going
interesting, you know.
into election years, so many places this year.
Yeah.
Obviously the US being number one, and just already the absolute polarization that you see is truly terrifying.
It is terrifying, and it is funny what you say that we never talk to people the way we do on social media in real life. Like, I guess a good analogy is road rage. Like
Yeah,
you're in your car, you're driving 80 k's an hour, someone cuts you off, like flip them the bird or whatever. Like not me, but people do.
yeah,
Uh, but it's like, well, that's because there is this distance between you and them, and there is this element of safety. Like I'm in my car. Whereas if that person pulled over, cut you off, and you probably change your
yeah,
tone very, very quickly, because then it's face to face and you look that person in the eyes, and there is an element of danger as well. So yeah, like social media has brought out perhaps the worst in a lot of people, but also the best, depending on how you choose to look at it. Like there's a lot of wonderful content out there. So in the time that we have left, I'd love to just like explore, perhaps on a lighter note, the influencer economy today. What is the state of influencer marketing? I know Instagram has or are releasing an algorithm change that is going to amplify all sorts of voices, regardless of how big their following is, similar to TikTok. So, high level, what is the state of influencer marketing today, Taryn?
yeah. Look, I think it's going to be really interesting to see as well what happens with TikTok in the US. I know they're calling it a TikTok ban. Obviously, it's not going to get banned. It's just going to be for sale. But obviously, that may change the algorithm in the US as well if that isn't sold as part of the transaction. So I
Mhm.
think it's going to be a really wild 12 months. I think that the change that Instagram is making is obviously heavily influenced by the TikTok algorithm. What has made TikTok, one of the reasons TikTok is so popular, obviously the short form video content is incredibly addictive, and the algorithm is phenomenal. But it allows so many people with smaller audiences to go viral or get great reach, because it's purely based on how that individual piece of content performs, not on how large your own audience is. So think Instagram making that adjustment to their own algorithm is definitely an attempt to win back audience to the platform and get people with those smaller audience sizes being able to have that equal opportunity of reaching eyeballs and having that content seen. So I'm very interested to see how that changes both people's time on platform and their engagement with it. I think brands in Australia predominantly are still executing on Instagram ahead of TikTok. I think for brand safety reasons, I think for the certainty of they understand how to use the platform, they have a little bit more control over how the content's going to be produced and what it looks like. I think for brands, understandably, their traditional advertising, they have complete control over the content and the narrative. When you start working with influencers, you don't have that control. The whole reason you're engaging with this creator is they're the storyteller, they're the script writer, they're the creative director, they're the talent. You have to, for that content to work, you have to put your brand in their hands and say, like, you know your audience best, you know what's going to perform best, you make it, you bring our brand to life. And I understand that that's scary for a brand. I think we're definitely seeing a shift towards, especially in this economic climate, a shift towards micro and nano creators, away from sort of really large celebrity macro creators. I think one, they're much more affordable to work with. You can work with so many more for the same budget as you would just one person. It allows you to sort of A/B test different messages and see what really resonates. Obviously, we all know UGC is incredibly powerful, and it's what customers want to see. They want to see someone who looks like them, feels like them, resonates with them, promoting a product that they can genuinely see them being a part of their own lives. And so UGC both, working with influencers to create that, and then using that across other platforms for retargeting and ad sets and in newsletters on your website, I think is incredibly powerful. And I think nano and micro creators are a really great way of doing that. So I think it's going to be a really interesting time. I do think we're going to continue to see the growth of UGC and brands really understanding how to make fantastic content that performs. I think we're still probably a little bit at the early days of that in Australia. And then I think just seeing how the platforms are going to change over the next 12 months will be really fascinating.
Yeah, and UGC being a user-generated content for yeah, absolutely. And
sorry, so many acronyms in this industry, isn't there?
oh yeah, no, it's my job as the podcast host to bring in the definitions of acronyms for our audience. But the a question that people will have, so there's going to be people in the audience who are either wanting to grow their following online, become an influencer, perhaps become more influential. I mean,
Yeah.
what are 2 or 3 like tips you have for people, given your experience in this space, if they are really looking to go hard and grow their following and influence online?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple of really easy wins. One, understand the algorithm. There's some really basic things like all social platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, will penalize you for not using new features or multiple features. So when they release a new feature or a new tool, use it, try it, understand the algorithm and what you're going to be penalized for and what you're not going to be penalized for. You can't just use Instagram just to send hundreds of DMs and not post content, engage with other profiles. And again, you can't just post and ghost. You can't just come onto the platform, post a piece of content and log out. You need to be on there. It's a social platform. They want to see you using it as such. So really just understanding how the algorithm works, I think, would be number one, and making sure that you're using it in the way that whatever the platform is would like you to be using it. That's going to increase the reach of your content. I think thinking about ways that you can organically grow your following. So whether that's through partnerships, finding someone who's got a business or a person who's got a high number of followers that you can do a collaboration with in some way, whether that's a going live with that person or creating content together that you can both share. I think is a really easy win. And then I think really understanding what the driver is. There's a lot of people get caught up in vanity metrics of, I want to have a certain number of followers. And you're like, well, what is it that you want those followers for? Like, is it actually you're trying to, grow your newsletter subscriber base, or you're trying to increase the number of conversions of an online course? Or because I think when you start to actually walk back what it is that you're trying to achieve, it's so much easier to then decipher what the best tactic is to achieve that outcome. Because, for example, if it's getting people to sign up to your newsletter, or maybe it's, Instagram stories that you're using where there's a direct link for people to be able to download a white paper from you that has kind of whatever, some interesting piece of information that they would like to part with their email address for. Obviously, that's a completely different strategy that you would be using than if you were trying to derive, direct sales from a particular product. So I think working out what the end goal is, and also just being really mindful, like, is this just vanity metrics? Am I doing this because I just want the external love and validation that I'm cool? And then I think you've got more digging to do as to why on that.
Absolutely, and the vanity metric thing is real. Like, building an Instagram following of 100,000 people is cool, and obviously that can help you feel better about yourself on some sub level perhaps, but like I had a lot of success in the early days of this podcast back in like 2016 when there was maybe 200 people listening to an episode, but I was running a B2B tech consultancy, and a few of the people listening were actually working in marketing or working as CTOs at large law firms, and they became like 5 and 6 figure clients. I didn't need tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers. I just needed the right people to follow me.
Correct.
Even if it was one
Yeah.
person who had budget, appetite, need for my services, I was good. Whereas you could have a
Yeah.
massive audience, but unless you kind of know like where to from there, you might not actually be able to convert any of that into, monetary gain. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love also that you're thinking about influence in a different way. That podcasts are influential. Having a LinkedIn, not necessarily with a super high number of followers, but with a very engaged audience who specifically come to your page to learn about X particular thing. There's so many other platforms that can be incredibly influential and make you an influencer driving behavior in a particular way. Like yours was, I'm looking for a particular type of B2B client. And you don't need to have a high Instagram following to do that. So
yeah.
I think that's just so apt.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we are just about out of time, Taryn. This has been an absolute pleasure. Of course, if people want to connect with you, they can find you on Instagram at Taryn Williams. If they want to learn more about Hash Gifted, they can head over to hashgifted.com. And is there anything else you wanted to leave our audience with before we wrap up?
No, I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much. And yeah, please, like everyone, keep in touch. Drop me a note. And yeah, and you can all hold me to account on taking a sabbatical as well.
Don't worry, it's in my calendar for 3 months from next month, was it? So September the
Yeah.
8th. All right, done.